Okay, so back in July of this year, I traveled to London, England with Noah Guthrie and Good Trouble to play a one-off festival show, and it was a very educational trip, to say the least. Now, if you haven't seen the vlog, I'll link it here, but to catch you up, at some point in my trip from Atlanta to Boston to catch my flight to London, the wonderful folks at TSA decided to completely dismantle my pedal board in, I guess, the interest of safety. So when we got to the gig, my board completely failed and I had to play the show direct into the front of the backline amp. It ended up working out okay, but it's not what I wanted to have happen. Now, I've traveled internationally for gigs before, but this was my first time traveling to Europe with a proper rig. I brought a guitar, I brought my full pedal board, I did use a backline amp, but I learned a few valuable lessons on this trip. So in today's video, I'm gonna build my ultimate fly rig. Now, before we get started, don't forget to subscribe and click the bell icon to be notified when I'm going live, posting new videos. If you'd like to support the channel directly, consider buying a coffee mug or t-shirt, all linked below. And there you can also find all of the links to my Helix presets, Kemper profiles, including the presets that I'm gonna be making for this video. So before we get started, I know what you're probably thinking. Why don't you just take your Helix or your Kemper stage? And you're right, those are really great rigs. I use them live all the time, but they still require their own separate case. And I'm trying to avoid that with this rig. The idea here is to be able to put this entire rig in my checked luggage, in my suitcase with my clothes and toiletries and everything else, so that I don't have to check more than one bag. So to do that, I'm gonna be building this entire rig around the HX Stomp. So the name of the game with this rig is gonna be small, lightweight, easy to use, and reliable. At the moment, I'm thinking this is all I'm gonna take to Holland in December. If this board comes out like I want it to, this thing's gonna be seriously powerful. The idea is I will be able to use it either on its own as a standalone rig with the HX Stomp doing my amp modeling and cabinet simulation where I'm running stereo out to front of house or an in-ear monitor rig. Or if I do have a backline amp on the road, I can use this as an effects processor in conjunction with a couple of other pedals that I'm gonna have on the board and run it as a normal pedal board. I'm gonna be taking advantage of the MIDI functionality as well as the stereo effects loop on the HX Stomp. So before we get into building the pedal board, let's talk about the different pedals, the power supply, and the board itself. If you want more information on everything that I'm using in this rig, it'll all be linked in the description box down below. Now, the pedal board itself, I went with something really small and really simple. This is one of the mono pedal boards that they just released not too long ago. And I picked this because it's the right size. This will fit in just about any suitcase I have, even some carry-on duffel bags. This will fit in comfortably. It's also really simple. There's no welds or seams. It's literally just one piece of metal that's folded in two places. I'm also kind of a sucker for design aesthetic, and I just like the simplicity of how this looks. Next up, we have the power supply. Now, if you are a Line 6 Stomp or HX Effects user, you know that both of those pedals have really quite strange power requirements. They come included with these wall warts, which, I mean, Line 6, come on, this is like the most impractical thing ever. It's a weird shape. It doesn't sit properly in most outlets, and the cable just isn't long enough. Now, there's a few options out there for power supplies that'll work with the HX Stomp. I think chief among them is the Chalks DC7. This fits underneath the mono board or your typical flat pedal train boards. It's got 7 outlets, all switchable between 9, 12, 15, and 18 volts. It's even got a USB outlet on the side, which is a nice little touch. Now, Chalks did sponsor this video by providing the power unit for free, so thanks to them for that. If you want more information, link below. Now, one of the coolest things about the HX Stomp is the fact that it has a stereo effects loop that you can use to patch in an outboard or a series of outboard effects. And in that loop, I'm gonna put the Specular Tempest from GFI System. This is an insanely powerful little pedal. It's a delay and reverb. It has some of the best sounding delay and reverb algorithms out there, and it comes in a really small footprint. Now, it's not without some trade-offs. You don't have a ton of external controls on the panel, and you don't have a tap tempo, but my plan is to use the tap tempo on the HX Stomp connected via MIDI to control the switching and the tap tempo here on the Specular Tempest. Now, the reason I'm using this in the loop is I want to free up some of the DSP in the HX Stomp. If you own an HX Stomp, you know that you only have 6 blocks on the Stomp to use. And so I want the maximum amount of DSP, or number of blocks, free to use for amp modeling or overdrives, fuzzes, any other type of effects other than reverbs and delays. So the Specular Tempest is going to be handling all of that outside of the Stomp in stereo, which will be a nice touch, and I'll use the MIDI capability on this pedal from the HX Stomp to control it. And last but not least, I wanted to use an outboard overdrive, so I'm going with the new Revival Drive Compact from Origin Effects. This thing is super cool. It's very amp-like, and in my experimentation so far, it works really well in front of the HX Stomp. Now, I'll get into how I'm going to route the pedal board in just a minute, but this is what I'm going to start with. So this is going to be the basic layout of the board. I've sat with it for a few days, moved some things around, kind of mocked it up, seeing how I'm going to route the cables, and I think this is the best option. So the first thing we need to do is mount the power supply to the board. So I got the power supply mounted. It's looking pretty good. It's on there super securely, and I even left the little rubber feet on the bottom of it to, I don't know, maybe give it some shock absorption capabilities. The next thing I'm gonna do is put the pedals on the board and get them in their final positions. And we're using dual lock for this build, and specifically 2 different densities of dual lock. This is something I picked up from my friend Mason Marangella when we built my main pedal board about a year ago. I'll have the exact dual lock I'm using linked in the description box down below for those of you following along at home. But the first thing that I'm gonna do to get ready for the dual lock is clean off the pedal board surface using some rubbing alcohol. Since I've been handling this board, there's going to be a lot of oils and dirt and dust on here that might hinder the adhesive on the dual lock from sticking. My goal is to make this thing as TSA proof as possible. That's no longer really a thing, but we're still going to try. Oh, that's a lot of alcohol. The pedals are mounted to the board. I'm gonna start running power next. So, like I said earlier, the Chalks DC7 will run the HX Stomp. Now, you're gonna need more than just the power supply to do that. The first thing you're gonna need is a parallel adapter like this right here. Basically, it lets you take 2 outlets and bridge them into 1 cable. And then the second thing you're gonna need is the 2.5mm center negative plug. These are the Line6 plugs. So what'll happen is you'll just plug that into that and use 2 of your outlets. But the cool thing is when you have those adapters and you put them together, it does power the HX Stomp, no problem. So now I'm gonna run power to the other 2 pedals, get the cabling all cleaned up, and then move to signal. Okay, so the board is wired for power. As you can see, everything's lit up, ready to go. And it came out pretty clean on the underside. I went a little bit overboard with the cable tie downs, but my idea was that you know, this is probably gonna fly in my suitcase, and I didn't want anything grabbing some of these cables and ripping them off. So, quick pro tip with the cable tie downs, you want these. I'll have them linked in the description box down below. These are the marine grade cable tie downs. The reason you want these is because they have a much stronger adhesive on them than the normal ones that you get at like Home Depot or Ace Hardware. So they stand up to humidity and moisture and different conditions when you're traveling a lot better than the normal ones do. I highly recommend them, and they're cheap. For a bag of like 100, I think it's like maybe 10 or 11 bucks. So definitely invest in some of those. So the next thing I got to do is make some signal cables. Basically, the way I've got this run is I'm going to have the revival drive going into the first input of the HX Stomp, and then I'm going to utilize the stereo effects loop for the Specular Tempest. So I have 4 cables to make. All right, so here it is, all wired up and put together. I ended up redoing the signal cable because the original cable I was using was some old Lavacraft cable from boards in the past, and I rewired it with the Mogami 2319 cable, which I have on my main pedal board. Now for the underside of the board, you can see I've got the chocks mounted right in the middle, and all of my power for the pedals is coming out of just this side here. And I've got 3 more outlets on the other side. Should I decide to run another pedal, I can just bring an extra cable, run it out the other side of the power supply. And I also have my MIDI cable run underneath the board from the HX Stomp to the Specular Tempest. But as you can see, everything is tied down and secure and clearly visible. So hopefully TSA will be less likely to try and pull stuff apart because they can easily see everything that's on this board and they can tell that it's not a bomb. Even though under the X-ray, I could definitely see how this would look suspicious. So let's plug it up and hear how it sounds. Okay, so there it is, my HX Stomp mini board. I gotta admit, this thing is really, really powerful. When you think about everything that the HX Stomp can do and is capable of, it's more than just a modeler. It can be a full-on effects unit. It's an audio interface. In fact, the sound examples you were just hearing was straight out of the USB port into my laptop, into Logic 10. There was no mic preamps, there was no patching to do. It was literally just a USB cable. The reality is the HX Stomp probably deserves its own video, so if that's something you'd like to see, let me know by leaving a comment down below. But this thing came out really, really great. Better than I expected, even. The Revival Drive Compact works really well in front of the Stomp because you can do a lot in terms of tweaking the tone. It reacts differently depending on what amp model you have it in front of. I was able to get the HX Stomp and the Specular Tempest working together via MIDI, so the tap tempo control on the HX Stomp now sends tempo information to the Specular Tempest, and it also will switch presets. So it's going to take some time, but I'm going to build some rig specific presets in the Stomp for this setup so that I can just hit one button and have the MIDI switch the Specular Tempest and the Stomp together. I'm really excited about this thing. So let me know what you think about this rig build in the comments section down below. Are you looking to do something similar, or have you done something already with the HX Stomp? And if you'd like to see an HX Stomp specific video, let me know by leaving a comment down below as well. If you'd like to support the channel directly, check out the Green Room, which is linked down below. And if you're a podcast listener, go download the Backstage Journal podcast. We're 15 episodes in, and I'm having a ton of fun making those shows. Thanks everyone for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's video. I'm Rhett Shull, and remember, there is no plan B.